Hey, gang, we've talked a lot about different ways to monetize live streaming and podcasting over the years. But one thing we've never talked about is podcasting for the federal government. Well, we've got a great guest today, Tim Brien. He's doing it. He's bringing podcasting into the federal government, hosting and producing podcasts and making the case for why it is such a valuable tool for internal communication. And some podcasts he's doing as well are for the general public. He's got his own line of podcasts as well. The flagship show is the Create Art podcast. Tim is here. Let's do a show. Let's do a show right now. Hey, gang, welcome to Brand on Broadcasting. I'm Ross Brand. Today's show is brought to you by Livestream Universe. Check it out for all things live streaming, livestreamuniverse.com. It's been a while since we've done an interview on Brand on Broadcasting, but this is definitely an area that is completely uncharted territory for this or any of my other shows. We're talking today about podcasting for the federal government. Believe it or not, the federal government has a lot of different podcasts, and our guest today is going to tell us all about it. He's been doing it. He is a podcaster's podcaster. He's got, I think, 6 shows he's doing for the government, 3 he's doing on his own time, and he's a speaker at some of the different podcast events. We were both together speaking at Joe Pardo's Independent Podcaster Conference in Philadelphia just a few weeks back, and he gave a talk about so many interesting aspects of the federal government that I just was completely unaware of. And I think, of course, for Brand on Broadcasting, it's the podcasting aspect that is fascinating, the opportunity that's there, the opportunity he's created for himself and others, and the good that he's doing with his podcast. So let's bring him on. He's Timothy Kimo Brien, or Tim Brien, as I've known him for several years. As I mentioned, the Create Art Podcast, createartpodcast.com is where you can find him. Tim, welcome to Brand on Broadcasting.
Ross, this is fantastic to be here. Thank you so much. And welcome to the Kimo's Den of Iniquity, my man cave, my studio. We do everything right here.
Well, that's incredible. I want to ask you, before we get into podcasting for the federal government, this isn't your first rodeo with podcasting. Tell us how you got into it and kind of what made it such a passion for you.
Well, Ross, I got into podcasting way back in 2006. So a lot of people go, "Hey, you're one of the OGs," but I got to say that I didn't quite know what I was doing in 2006, and it took me until 2016 to kind of figure out I was doing it wrong. If you can do podcasting wrong, wrong.
I'm not sure I've ever heard that before, but you're doing it wrong.
Well, I ran into a good friend of ours, Kyle Bondo, and he was running a meetup here in Fredericksburg, Virginia, where I moved to. And I sat in, I attended the classes, and I figured out how to do podcasting with the audience in mind. Because I was just doing it to put stuff out there, and I was like, yeah, whatever goes. But he really changed that for me. And then he took me to my first podcast conference in DC. I had neck surgery. I don't recommend this for anybody. Don't go to don't do neck surgery and then 2 weeks later attend a podcast conference. It's no good. But then I think we met you the very next year at MapCon, Joe Pardo's his conference, and it's just taken off since then. And in 2019, I got a job with my current employer right now, Customs Border Protection, and we started doing podcasts with them in about 2021.
What's interesting, I remember your speech really well from back in 2019, because you talked about just what you said when you met up with Kyle. You talked about relating to an audience and how you communicate to an audience. The words you choose can make a big difference in building that connection. Can you give us like a quick summary of how a podcaster, live streamer, YouTuber can think about communicating with their audience?
Oh, absolutely. Well, you want to communicate, at least I feel, to communicate with one person at a time. So in this live stream that we have right now, there's you, there's me, and I have an avatar that I am talking to. I'm talking to that one person, and that's not to fool anybody, but that's just to make it more intimate because podcasting is very intimate. You know, we're going in people's ears all the time. With YouTube, which I'm delving into YouTube and live streaming, I'm delving into it. So praise be to you. You're the man behind that. I take the same approach. We're talking with one person, whether it's actually 1,000 people, 100,000 people, or if it is just one person. If we're just talking to mom, we're making that intimate connection with them. And I think doesn't matter live stream, podcaster or YouTuber, we're all doing the same thing. Because I know for me, when I'm watching YouTube videos, I'm not watching it with a group of people. I'm watching it on my own. So
Right, right. Well, let's get to the federal government because this is really exciting what you're doing. You have 6 podcasts. You started a 7th and then turned that over to other people. You're hosting one of them. Give us an overview, first of all, of the type of podcasts you're doing and what you think the value of podcasts are for the federal government and its employees and alumni and folks like that.
absolutely. So I work in a offshoot of HR, and we deal with the resilience of our employees. And all of our programs deal with some aspect of resilience. We've broken it down into 8 different domains of resilience. I'm not going to go through those with you, but the podcast that I do, there's one on, it's available externally. It's called the CBP Suicide Prevention Podcast. I know I keep it simple. I learned that from our good friend Dave, Hall of Fame, Dave
Right,
Jackson.
right.
Dave, you owe me $100 for that. But I keep the names really super simple because you want to know what it's about. So we have the Suicide Awareness and Prevention Podcast. And also externally, we have the Living in Recovery podcast. Now, the Suicide Prevention and Suicide Awareness and Prevention podcast, it deals with people telling their stories of, their experiences with suicide. We have some people that are survivors. We have some people that are supervisors of people that have committed suicide, family members that have committed suicide. And we actually have, and this is a great story of the guy that is behind this, besides me. Back in 2021, I was having my yearly review, and my boss's boss was doing the review with me, and she said, "Hey Tim, you're the podcast guy, right? You keep on talking podcasts."
Right.
And she's like, "I got a guy that we just hired. He's a suicidologist." I'd never heard of what a suicidologist is. Who knew? And he was former Air Force, and I'm former Air Force. So I said, yeah, let me talk to the guy. He was huge into podcasts, and he said, we need to get this podcast out there because Customs and Border Protection, we do have a problem with suicides. We have agents out in the field 24/7, and they're dealing with the things that they see out on the border. And with just normal life issues that can happen to anybody. And so we went ahead and put out that podcast. The reason we put it out externally is because a lot of our agents, they don't have the luxury of having their work laptop. My work laptop is right here, so I'm fine. I can, watch internal stuff till I'm blue in the face. But our agents don't have that ability. But what can they do? They can go on to Spotify. They can go on Apple Podcasts. Google Podcasts is leaving. but
Right.
they can go onto YouTube and they can get this information, and they can not feel so alone out there. They can go, oh, yeah, this person went through something like that, and they use the services that CBP provides. And we've been able, I don't want to say that the podcast is solely responsible for this, but I want to say that it has made it available to more people in our agency so that that way they can get to it and get the information that they need. And our suicide rate has dropped significantly in 2023. So we were having
That's fantastic.
15 to 20 a year, which one a year is too much. And I think we are at, if I remember right, 4 or 5, which again is too many. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, yay, woo, woo, woo. But we have had a impact on those numbers, and we're continuing with doing it that way. So that's the suicide prevention one. The other one that people can get to is living in recovery.
Yeah,
And
tell us about that one.
that one, so I produce the suicide prevention, and I also produce the living in recovery one. And I was actually a guest on one of them. Due to the nature of our jobs, especially our agents, they're out in the field all the time. Alcohol is an issue. And people, they get worried that if they say, hey, I need a hand, I need to go to a 12-step group, or I need to, get some time off and get this taken care of. Or if they have a family member that is going through that issue, this podcast is for them to let them know that, first and foremost, we want to keep you as an employee. We're a family atmosphere. We call ourselves brothers and sisters, and it's not that we just throw it out there. We actually mean it. And we put this out there to give people some hope, to give people some resources. I was actually on it because I come from a family of alcoholics. And I have mom, dad, alcoholics, and other people in my life were alcoholics, and that impacted me. So I went ahead and I went through a 12-step program myself to better help me relate to them. Now, my mom and dad have passed away long ago, but I have other people in my life that are, active alcoholics, and it helped me to tell my story. And other people in CBP have reached out to me, and they said, hey, thanks for telling me that, because I've been through that too. And, giving them the resources that they need for it has helped them out tremendously. The big thing is we want our family, which is about 66,000 people, give or take a few. We want that family to stay together. If for no other reason, it's tough to bring people in the federal government, A.
Right.
But B, we're working so closely together, especially in the pandemic era that we were just coming out of, that we're doing a lot of things, on screens and whatnot, but we're making those connections, and we're helping people out with not just their work life, but with their home life as well. And that's a major focus for all the podcasts that I produce for CBP.
And so if somebody wants to listen to that episode where you're a guest, I put the link to the podcast Living in Recovery in the YouTube description. It'll also be in the show notes of the podcast, as well as some of the other links Tim has shared with me. Okay, so now you've got 4 podcasts that you're producing that are behind I don't know, paywall isn't the right term, but you need to log in. You need to be an employee or have a login with Customs and Border Protection if you want to listen to those. Are you able to talk at all about what those shows are about and kind of, give us, the headline about each one? Or
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the reason they're not external just yet is, federal government, we move slow.
Right.
We move slow. This is not, hey, get rich tomorrow. This is, I've seen a lot of talks with other podcasters at other conventions and whatnot. They say, it takes 3 years to be an overnight success. With the federal
Right.
it's taken me 11. So that gives you an idea of this is not you're going to do this quick. It's going to take some time. There's a lot of luck involved and all that. But for the 4 others that I work on, we have one that's called Healthier. It's for our Healthier CBP, My Health and Fitness Journey.
Right.
And that talks about employees doing a healthy lifestyle, changing their diet, more physical activity, and just what that has done for them and the resources. I'm huge on resources with that. Another one is called Recovery Conversations. That one is linked to Living in Recovery, but it is hosted by 2 members that are actually in recovery, and they're talking about their struggles. They're talking about when they came to their bosses and how they have actually thrived while going through recovery, and how CBP hasn't kicked them to the curb because they're going through recovery. We've embraced them. We said, okay, we know that this is an issue for you. Let's make it happen. Let's do what we can do. So that one we have. We also have our employee assistance program, which is one that I actually host because my program manager that is in that division, she's scared of microphones. Mine doesn't bite, but I get it. Not everyone likes to hear the sound of their voice or look at. We're 2 handsome men here, obviously. So
Obviously, it goes without saying.
Without saying, but so she doesn't enjoy that, but that's okay, because what she does is she provides the guests, she provides the question, and she provides the marketing internally for it. So that's fine. I'm great with that. All I got to do is show up, ask questions, be fun, turn on the mic, record, turn off the mic, and we're good to go. And then we have our Veteran Service Program podcast, which is aimed at our veterans internally in CBP. And I apologize, I'm using a lot of acronyms. But we'll have I'll do a PDF for everybody at the end.
We can attach that to the podcast. So the important ones are CBP is Customs and Border Protection. Mm-hmm. I in my head I was saying patrol where the P is, but it's Customs and Border Protection. And DHS is Department of Homeland Security, and CPB is a part of DHS.
Correct. Yep. DHS is
and ABC is easy, like 1, 2, 3.
It's a great song. I have it on vinyl here, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, the Veteran Support Program, VSP podcast, that is all about veterans and veteran issues that they have when they join CBP, and we will deal with the Veterans Administration, making sure that they have all their benefits, they get all their leave that they're entitled to, that their pension comes over to CBP, so that way when they retire from CBP, which is huge for me because I'm a program manager for financial wellness. So I want to make sure that everyone's getting their money when they finally leave us. And just kind of a camaraderie of people that, veterans we can spot each other pretty easily. And we have our own language that we don't use any vowels. We use all acronyms. So when you see Kyle and I talking at a podcast conference, you're not going to know what we're saying.
No, I would need a translator.
Exactly. We got a dictionary for you, not a problem.
So let's turn to kind of how you were able to get to podcasting. Obviously, somebody knew that you were a podcaster because you've talked about it, and when the time came, so it's good to talk about podcasting and the content that you create at times at work, because obviously businesses are more and more, and government and nonprofits integrating podcasting and video and different tools into their outreach, either internally, their internal outreach, internal marketing, internal communications, and support for their employees, or to the general public. So when that person brought it up to you, was it just a smooth ride from there, or did you have to go to a lot of meetings and do a lot of selling on from there? Like that was just the day one of a long process.
Exactly. Well, it took me about 10 years to get to that meeting.
Right.
And the big thing is, especially when the pandemic hit, one of the things that I would do for all of my coworkers is I would do a daily podcast recommendation. And mostly it dealt with resiliency topics, healthy eating, healthy mindsets. And during the pandemic, those were a dime a dozen. Those podcasts were all over the place. So it was easy pickings to toss that to my coworkers for their different programs. And so I got known to be the podcast guy at CBP. People that I hadn't even met knew about me because everyone would say, "Oh yeah, you want to hear a podcast about competitive Rubik's cubing? Call up Tim; he'll find it for you." And then I would call up Dave Jackson and go, "Hey, Dave, again, Dave, another $100, please, thank you." I would find those kind of podcasts for them. And so they knew that I was huge into podcasting, that I produced my own podcast, and it took that long to sell it to them because a lot of people in CBP, we are what I call top heavy. So we have a lot of people that are going to be retiring in probably the next 5 to 10 years. So they're not technically savvy. So when they hear podcasts, they go, first of all, what's a podcast? Don't even mention live streaming to them, because then they're like, that's way more advanced. But we're dealing with that kind of a mindset, and it's a slow moving thing, and that can be good or bad, depending on what you're talking about. I think with podcasting, it's good that it's a little bit slower in the federal government, because we want to make sure that everything that we're, all the resources and all the things that we're doing for our employees, we have to follow all these rules, all this red tape, all this bureaucracy in order not to harm our employees. And then when we put it out to the public, that's another layer of bureaucracy that we have to go through, because we're dealing with public affairs division. Every agency has a public affairs division. And that's one of the things that when we were at that conference and I was talking about, is a way to get into this kind of stuff is to look at your public affairs division pages, because they're always public facing. The government has Facebook pages, Twitter or X pages, Instagram pages. We have all of that. And we even have podcasts too that a lot of people don't even know about. So we're doing it, but we're doing it very slowly, very carefully. And the reason being is because Tim is going to, probably retire in 10, 15 years. And I have a plan for when I do, and we'll get involved. We'll talk about that. But there's going to be people there that are coming into the federal government that are going to take on the role that I do. And so it's not, just a flash in the pan. We do one thing and then we go away. There's going to be other people that take up the mantle, that take up the flag, whatever it is, for the agency. And it has to be something that is going to be long lasting and is going to be beneficial to the public. And again, not harm the public. That's the last thing we want to do, is is have somebody listen to the suicide prevention podcast and go, "Oh, that's a great idea. I think I'm going to go ahead and unalive myself." No, we want to give resources. We want to be up to date with the resources. Some of the older episodes we do need to update, and that came before 988 came out. There's the National Suicide Hotline, and now you have 988. So we need to update those. And that's why it can take such a long time. So we're battling the lack of tech savviness. We're battling the bureaucracy. I had a good friend of mine. He's a Army guy. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He's a Navy guy. And he said, changing the culture in the federal government is like taking a Q-tip and pushing a aircraft carrier and just turning it with a Q-tip. It's going to take some time. It's going to happen. And I'm one of those stubborn type of people that it's going to happen.
Right.
It's just take a minute.
Do you see the day coming when the federal government actually hires dedicated podcast producers whose job it is to facilitate, sometimes host, find the talent, put the shows together, pitch and promote the shows? Because right now, I'm going to guess that once you started doing the podcast, they didn't say, oh, let us just take everything else off your desk and that is your job. No, I mean, these are additional responsibilities that you've generously added to your already full plate. So how do you think that's going to develop? Do you think there's a time where they realize that podcasting has such a value internally and externally that they move to create positions that are focused just on it?
It's funny you mentioned that because I actually did a detail. It's a temporary assignment with our public affairs division, and my whole job was to work on a podcast called CBP Talks, and that podcast is 2 or 3 episodes out right now. And so that was actually my job to do that. Unfortunately, I was such a good employee and I had 4 programs on top of all these podcasts that I was holding down. And we had about 2 or 3 people find jobs in other agencies while I was on this detail. So my boss, wonderful person, she said, hey, Tim, I need you to come back. I'm drowning. And, again, we're a family. So I wasn't going to let her drown. The programs that I run are really important: financial wellness, telework, volunteerism, and a number of others. I wasn't going to let those just go by the wayside. So I came back. So it is starting to happen. Most of the people that are doing it are in your public affairs divisions, and they're doing the podcasting kind of on the side. But they're also doing a lot of, Twitter posts, Facebook posts, YouTube posts, all that kind of stuff. So it's starting to happen. Will it be a dedicated thing? I hope so. We need to get a generation out before that happens, though. So I'm thinking probably in the next 10 to 15 years, you will see when you go to USA Jobs, where you get your federal jobs at, there will be dedicated positions for that. Also depends on budgets. If I love it when people pay their taxes, please continue to pay your taxes. It's my salary.
Right.
and I have an expensive habit.
Right. Now, you mentioned that your department is adjacent to HR. Has there been any talk of HR using podcasts as a way to interest people in working for the department, the federal government, and also as a part of the recruiting process?
There is talks about it, and they come and they talk to me about it, and they look at what it takes to produce a really good podcast, something that is going to really attract people into working for CBP.
Right.
And a lot of them, I'd say 95% of them, don't have the skills to produce a good podcast. Even our public affairs division that I did a detail with, they discovered very quickly they thought they could slap something together and put it out there. And I said, no, if it's going to have my name on it, it's not going to be slapped together, and it's not going to be trash. It's going to be good. It's going to be quality.
Right.
And so they don't have the staffing right now to produce that. And I'm only one guy. I mean, yeah, I'm a dad of twins and I do a million things, but I can only do so much.
Right, right.
I, do I see that in the future? Yes. As a matter of fact, and it's great that we're having this conversation right now because I'd been using my own equipment to produce all these podcasts.
Right.
Just off camera here, there's 3 big boxes. We've got microphones. We've got a PodTrack P4. So
Nice.
you can give me $100 for that. Headphones. We've got windscreens. We've got isolation barriers. So that way, when I'm producing the podcast here, I'm not in a soundproof room. This is none of this is treated, but I know how to fix things with software to make it sound like, oh yeah, Tim did this in a studio.
Right.
So
Right.
that's kind of the thing with it. There are podcasts that are out there that are produced internally in CBP that, how do I put it politely? They sound like they were done off of somebody's phone in the bathroom. And for me, I have a hard time listening to that. For somebody that is, not a audio, and I'm not an audio engineer, I'm not an audio snob. It's just, it's almost unlistenable. And when it's unlistenable, you miss the message.
Right.
And
Right.
the big thing is, can you understand the people? Bingo. That's number one. Is the content what it needs to be? The content for a lot of these podcasts are good, but you can't understand them. And the format is the format good and solid. Ross, naturally, you have a fantastic format. You're. I need to get you in the federal government. Actually, I'm in hand doing this. I really do. But their format is more of a Joe Rogan style format, which there's nothing wrong with Joe Rogan. Hey, he makes $100 million. I'm not blasting that at all, but a lot of people with the sensitive topics that we talk about, Joe Rogan talking about suicide prevention, I don't know. Probably not his best topic to talk about. But when we're talking about it, to our folks, we make sure that we've got good sound, good format, great content. That's the big thing.
Right, right. And I know that you've talked about the technical side of editing and putting the podcast together. What extra steps, if any, do you have to take in reviewing the material, edits, because some information's too sensitive or some information might be harmful? Like, I imagine that you have to go over it much more carefully than your own personal podcast to make sure that everything is aligned with the messaging and nothing's being put out there that either could be harmful to an employee or a listener, but also may go beyond what the policy is of what we talk about publicly or what have you if you're part of the federal government.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, being part of the federal government, it's not that I don't have the same rights that you have, Ross. I have more responsibilities than what Ross has. I can say certain things, but I can't say other things because that's my job. We do we actually do go through and do a lot of what's called information security or InfoSec. We don't list any of the, like with the suicide prevention podcast, we don't list any of the locations where the people work at. It's not germane to the story anyways.
Right.
But we don't want the bad guys to know where these locations are. We don't want the bad guys to be able to exploit that person or to bribe that person or harass that person in any way, shape, or form. So with suicide prevention, it's no locations, first names. We do have one where our leadership had talked and weighed in about suicide prevention, and we gave their names, but they're used to being public facing people anyways.
Right.
Most of the people that we talk to are your average Joe and Jane people that do the job. The people that our leaders love them to death. They can give me a pay raise anytime.
Right.
But they're more used to dealing with the public, and that's more of a a presentation and a persona that they put on, and whereas we like to have the average guy in the street dealing with these issues.
Right.
So yeah, we do go through a lot more scrutiny than we would on my personal podcast, and even on my personal podcasts, um, I don't necessarily mention that I work for Custom Border Protection because, well, Create Art Podcast has nothing to do with CBP.
Right.
Uh, find a podcast about I could review one of the podcasts I produce, but that's not really a fair thing to do.
Right.
So,
Right. So let's talk about your personal podcast. First of all, you have Create Art Podcast. Tell us when you started that and how that's developed.
so Create Art Podcast, that's yeah, it's an interesting thing because it used to be KDOI Podcast, Kimo's Den of Iniquity. My nickname is.
Okay.
And then I had Dave Jackson review that old podcast, and he said, "What is KDOI? It sounds like a radio station." And he goes, "Yeah." And then he goes, "Kimo's Den of Iniquity. Okay, that sounds like a BDSM kind of thing." Yeah, and I was like, "Well, it's not a radio station, and it's not really BDSM." He's like, "The name needs to be simpler."
Right.
And he did this on his podcast, so this is out there for everybody. He called my baby ugly, and I was glad he did.
Right.
And then I thought, well, what is this podcast about? And it's about creating art. Now, why did I do that podcast? Well, because when I worked for the United States Army as a civilian, there we used I was what's called the transition coordinator. So I would help wounded, ill, and injured soldiers that were getting out of the Army find employment. And I thought a good way to do that to be in communication with their families, because a lot of times they were shipped to our base. Their families weren't allowed to be with them for whatever reason. Maybe they're over in Okinawa or they're over in Europe or something like that. And I thought instead of sending an email newsletter, let's have a podcast that features them and let's have them talk about their art therapy, because I'm a big art guy. I'm a theater major way back in the day. And so I started the KDOI podcast, which got turned into the Create Art Podcast, mainly because of that. And everyone says have your avatar.
Mhm.
My avatar, his picture is sitting right here. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. He was one of the soldiers that we lost. And so every time I do a show for Create Art Podcast, he's sitting there right there with me, and I do the show for him. If everyone else is listening, fantastic, great.
Wow.
I hope you get something out of it. But I do it in memory of him each and every time. So that's how Create Art Podcast got started up, because people were like, "Hey, Tim, I'm doing this art therapy. I'm doing pen turning, making pens out of wood, or I'm drawing, or I'm painting, and I'm getting all this out." And I told him, "You need to be in a gallery. You need to you need to market this. Yeah, I can help you get a federal job, but this is something that you're putting your passion into. Maybe it's a good side hustle for you to get involved with." And
Right.
those guys and gals, they're very, very left brain. They're very, art is, artsy fartsy kind of stuff. And I'm like, I'm an artist.
Right.
You can see it from my walls here. I'm an artist, and I'm not artsy fartsy. And I would explain to them what certain terms meant and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
That is just the fuel for the podcast. So people's ignorance, and ignorance is a good thing, because if you're ignorant about something, you're open to be educated about it, and
Right.
then you change that ignorance into knowledge. And they were open to it. And my avatar, he listened to my podcast all the time. He would meet me in my office in the mornings and go, "Hey, Tim, that was a real stinker. That was a bad episode." I'm like, "Yes, sir, it was. I'm sorry." He goes, "Make it better. Make it something that I'm proud to listen to." So that's why he's
That's your motivation. Yeah. Talk about this podcast where you help people
Oh,
find other podcasts.
exactly. So find a podcast about, we talk about discoverability all the time. And even in federal podcasts, discoverability is tough. And what I wanted to do here is to say, I found this podcast, and I want to share it with you. And, I don't want you to go, hey, just listen to this and go with it. I want to tell you why I enjoy this podcast. Love and Radio is one of them. I absolutely love that podcast. Why do I love it? Well, because of the stories that Nick tells. I have a whole script that I go through. It's a 3-part show. So I give you the stats. If that's all you want is, the stats of the show, fantastic. I'll give you the stats of the show. How many episodes, where you can find it at, support pages, all that.
Right.
Second half is I tell you, I break it down into about 5 or 6 things that I like about the show: the sound quality, how the interaction between the guests and the host. And I'll put in clips from the show, so you can actually listen to part of the show. And then the last part is why I think this is a good binge-worthy podcast. Now, there is other podcasts about podcasts that are out there. Some of them teach you how to do a good podcast. A good one that I really love that I'm going to be interviewing him soon is Harry Duran's Podcast Junkies, where he actually interviews podcasters. And I've been on his show. Yay, Harry. You don't owe me $100, Harry. Maybe he does. But I wanted to take it farther than just, hey, I want to interview this guy and blah, blah, blah. I want to dissect the show and find out what makes it tick, why it's a good show, why I listen to it. I listen to about 150 podcasts. And people are going to say, but Tim, you have twins. You have a full-time job. You run 9 podcasts. Yeah, but sleep is an option. So
150, are they weekly podcasts, monthly podcasts, daily podcasts, all of the above?
Yes, all of the
above. Now, do you listen on 2 times speed or 3 times speed or 10 times speed? How do you listen to all those podcasts?
Well, I listen to them on 1 time speed.
I do too. I love to hear it as it's recorded, as it's meant to be recorded, edited, and put out there. There's something about, I can do an audiobook speeded up, but a podcast is more of a work of art, and you miss the art in it when it's speeded up. Then it's just like, give me the information. I'm not really connecting with the host. I'm not really feeling the emotion. So like I say, it works for an audiobook because you're talking hundreds of pages, but for a podcast, I want to spend those 30 minutes with the host and the guest. And
I'm the same way with you. Now, when I'm editing a podcast, I'll listen to it at 1.5, maybe 2 times speed.
Right.
But for everyone out there, listen to Ross Brand only in 1 time speed, because if you do them at 2 times speed, it is a totally different person. And I've tried it before. Don't do that. But yeah, just for me, I'm just, you and I are of a certain age,
right?
But we're handsome, so and we do a lot of podcasts.
There it is. There it is. And I think from my radio background, I talk fast enough anyway. So me on 2 times, it'd just be a little too much, I think. Okay, so now I notice you're using Podpage for that website, which is really cool, and you've got the guest intake form up there. So are people actually submitting shows to you, or are you open to people submitting shows, or is this clearly like you go out, you found something that you want to share with other people, and that's how the episode gets made?
I'm open to other people, either submitting their show. So any podcaster can come on there and submit their show and say, hey, Tim, listen to my show. I do warn people, I'm going to listen to the catalog. I'm going to listen to all your shows because with the shows that I already have out there, I have listened to each and every episode of their show. And, with Harry Duran, he's got like 300 and some odd shows. He's adding it. I'm like, Harry, can you give me a break so I can get you on my show, please? Dave Jackson, who's done his show, and I did a podcast rodeo on his with his stuff, and he had hundreds of stuff. So anyone can do that. It may take a while for that to happen, but I do welcome folks to submit their shows, or if you're a podcast listener out there that that has a show that I haven't heard about before, and you go, "Hey, can you review Ross Brand's golf announcement with Tiger Woods show?"
I was just walking to the
I
looking
was
to make the putt on the green at the Masters.
But yeah, if somebody would gets to submit that show, I'm going to listen to it, and I'll definitely let them know what I think about it. And it's got to be something that I find binge worthy. And I let people know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a. It doesn't have to be perfect sound quality, but it's got to be decent. I got to be able to hear it, and
Right.
it's got to have some good content. It's got to welcome people into it. It's got to be very welcoming. And it some of the stuff is subjective, and I'll admit it. Is it something that I'm interested in? Great, yeah, I'll do it. Back when I first started podcasting, I wasn't interested in monetization.
Right.
Now I'm like, monetization.
Right. Right.
So
How are
yeah,
they doing it? What can I learn? How can I take that, put
well,
it to use? If it's possible.
absolutely. Well, I figure if somebody has already invented the wheel,
Hmm.
why do I need to sweat and toil on it? If they have something that works, I want to find out about it and see if that's going to work for me. Now, maybe it's a square peg in a round hole, and I've got to adjust it a little bit. Okay, great. But yeah, I'm open to hearing about it for sure.
Well, I think the area of monetization that's probably least talked about online is what you're doing, which is you're going to somebody who needs the skill set of a host or a producer,
Mhm.
has an intended audience either built or out there, and saying, "Can you create content for me for this audience?" And
Mhm.
that's rarely talked about. I mean, almost everybody talks about monetization in terms of what can they sell, how can they get advertisers, how can they grow a big audience. But people forget about the idea that, not everybody is either able to or has the time to or the interest or passion to host their own show for their own brand or whatever. And there are organizations from the government to nonprofits to corporations that would be happy to hire somebody to do that. It's just you're not just building your own brand; you're building their brand. That's the trade off. But in terms of monetizing, it's a very legitimate way. It's what people have done in radio and television for, a century, right? They go to a established brand and network or station, and their station has an audience, and they try and grow it, but they don't have to build it from scratch. And there's a budget, and there are some things in place already that you can leverage and not have to build or do all on your own.
Absolutely. And there are a few people that can go out there and be the person, the jack of all trades. Am I the best audio engineer? No. There's people that have studied it for years and years and years that are way better than me. Chris Coran, fantastic audio engineer. Marcus DePaula, fantastic audio engineer. They can do circles around me.
Right.
But can they, believe in the brand, do this, do that, and do all of that kind of stuff? Yeah, it's not in their wheelhouse. It's not in their interest to do
Right.
that because they do one job and they do it fantastic. I've always been. My background is Air Force. I used to work on C-130 aircraft, and we did a thing. I was the spark chaser. I was the guy that made sure that anything that was powered had power to it. But we also needed to learn everybody else's job because in case somebody got unalived, you had to step in. So if an
Mhm.
engine guy is out, I got to know how to make those engines run. If the
Right.
avionics person is feeling sick, I got to know, how those avionics work so I can get that plane up in the air and that pilot home safe. And that's just the thing that I've always, when I was a kid in the Air Force, I was like, man, this is crap. And why do we got to learn all this kind of stuff?
Right.
And
Right.
now, as a seasoned 50-year-old, I'm like, oh, it makes sense, because that is a way to market and brand yourself when you're looking to break into this field. And that's quite honestly what the federal government is looking for when we're looking at bringing people in. And that's what I'm looking for when I'm bringing people in that are interested in the federal government. Yeah, don't specialize in one thing.
Right.
Because if I can pay you one price to do 5 things, I'm going to do that. Right. If I got to pay you one price for one thing, and then I got to pay somebody else a price for that thing, and that's too much money. We have a limited budget, and some years it's big, some years it's not so big. Some years we don't have a budget. So I'm looking for people that, and I don't want to get anyone the misunderstanding that, hi, I'm Tim Brien, I'm going to hire you for the federal government. Not my position. Not my position. But I do know what people are looking for. I do know what those HR folk are looking for when they're bringing people in. Those recruiters, they're looking for somebody that can, yes, do the job, but they can do everything around it as well. And all the tasks with it as well. And if you can do that on your own and set up your own company and do that for other companies, why not? I used to work in the corporate America. I used to work for Verizon Wireless and T-Mobile. Those folks are looking for people like that, and looking for podcasts. We have a grocery store right down the street from here, a Giant grocery store. I don't know if you have them up in New Jersey or not, but they have a podcast. Your grocery store has a podcast. Your grocery store has a podcast. Come on now. You should be, if you're interested in live streaming and podcasting and all that, you need to be in their face and going, hey, listen, I can do this for you. I can do the whole thing. One person, done and done.
Right.
They have a big budget. They can do it. Michael's, the art store, they have a podcast.
Wow.
Guess who's going to be an affiliate of Create Art Podcast?
Right.
Come on now. It's
makes total sense.
Makes total sense. We play right into it, and you can do it with the local stores, whatnot. But I would just encourage everybody here that's listening to Ross, because Ross has a fantastic show. I listen to it as well. I'm just going to encourage you all, if you have any interest in this, make it your brand. Make it be the person that can do it all, and do it all well, and make sure that you believe in the brand and the customer that you're working for, and name your price is basically it.
I think one of the advantages that online creators, podcasters, live streamers, YouTubers have is, we saw it in the beginning of the pandemic when you saw TV reporters and anchors trying to broadcast from home, and the audio was terrible and the video camera was off, and they maybe didn't have headphones, and they were on some type of Skype session or something where they really needed it, and you realize that even people who are making, in fact, probably more money they make and the higher they get in the business, the more specialized they become. And also what goes into a TV or radio station is so complicated at so many different levels. But if you want to get a broadcast together and do it online, the people who are doing what we're doing know how to use the equipment. They know what equipment to use. They know how to set it up. They know how to start the show. They know how to choose some music for it. They're probably, if they can't do a graphic, can probably recognize a template or a graphic designer that is capable of, doing something. In other words, they have this stack of skills that, most people who are in the mainstream media really don't have, because it wasn't required of them. I mean, when I worked in radio, I had no idea. I used whatever gear was in front of me. I had no input on the business side of things. Salespeople would say, if it's not for us, you wouldn't have a job. And I said, if it's not for us, you wouldn't have anything to sell.
That is the truth.
But other than that, good-natured ribbing, the business side was totally separate from editorial, which was totally separate from marketing and promotions and all that. I mean, everything was sort of siloed away, and you did what you were good at. I worked at stations where I never touched the board or anything technical. I mean,
Mhm.
other than the cough button on my mic, I really I just sat down and
Mhm.
usually like 2 seconds before the show would start, so that I wouldn't sit there and get nervous. but but my point is that in being an independent creator and doing this on your own, you actually have a skill set that one person can bring that most professionals in traditional media don't have because they weren't allowed to develop it or they didn't weren't able to develop it. Their shop may have been unionized, their shop may have been split between editorial and the business side, what have you, and so they don't have never had the ability or interest or time or whatever it was to learn all that. And so, for helping out a business, consulting, a government organization, a nonprofit,
Mhm.
if they can get it all and one person can do it all capably, that's better than having one person who's a extreme expert in one area, but doesn't have the other skills needed to pull off the finished product.
Exactly.
And that's I mean that's really the message that I'm taking home from what you're saying, kind of seeing it through my own experiences. Um, Now, you did mention like people working for the federal government. Can you talk a little bit about the process for people? I know there's always people looking for work. I have an HR background myself. Talk about the federal government and how people who are interested in working for one of the agencies or organizations can go about finding openings and getting on a list or getting an interview.
Sure, absolutely. So, with everything with the federal government, it's clear as mud. So,
Hmm.
and it's going to take forever to get in. You have tenacity with it. Whenever I've been interviewed, they're like, "What's your strongest suit?" And I always say tenacity. I will not stop. I will not stop until I have the job or the job is done, whatever project it is. Your first step is to go to USA Gov, jobs.gov, and that's the gateway in. Basically, you're going to tailor your resume to match what that job opening is. And this goes for any job out there. This just makes sense for any job because when somebody puts out a job posting, it's your first test. Can you do A, B, C, and D? If your resume talks about all the wonderful things you have done, but it doesn't mention A, B, C, or D, you're not getting the job. And don't be shocked that you're not getting the job because you're not going to get that job because you haven't told them you haven't done A, B, C, and D. The federal government, we're a little bit more stringent on that because if it's not in your resume, it doesn't exist. So if it's not in your resume, you're telling us, no, I don't know how to do this. We can't pick you. There's different hiring authorities with the federal government, and that can add points onto your resume. So think about your resume as as points. Are you hitting A, B, C, and D? Okay, great. That's maybe that's a low B. Okay,
Hmm.
if we're doing A, B, C, D, E,
And it's
F.
scored by an individual, right?
Yes,
It's not a tracking system, an automated system that scans for keywords. It's an actual individual that
mhm,
checks whether your resume actually matches up, right?
exactly. And that person is usually underpaid and very
Mhm.
upset and very angry. So make it simple for them, please. Please make it simple for them. If they say, we need you to do A, B, C, and D, put it in that order on your resume. So
Mhm.
that way they can check it off. And that's what they're going to be checking for. Did they mention, the big things that we're looking for? Great. You can mention the other stuff. By all means, mention the other stuff. But make sure that you get your A, B, C's, and D's done first.
Now,
Then after
just
that,
to highlight something that you said before, if you need to pay your rent next week, don't think because you uploaded a resume uh, that's going to be, hey, I can stop looking now. I can stop hustling now. When you said a long process, you're talking like months to years, right? I mean,
Absolutely. The job I currently have right now, I had applied for it in January of 2019. Okay.
mhm.
I got the interview July 1st of 2019. 6 months. I'd already have a secret background.
Mhm.
So I already have the background check. Background check can take 6 months to a year, just that part of it.
Wow.
I already bring that in the door with me. So in July 1st, I have that interview. During Indie PodCon, when it went out to Atlantic City in September,
Right.
I got a call during the conference. Hey, Tim, we need you to fill out a little bit more paperwork. If you fill it out, you have the job. So while you all were, doing the conference in the daytime and, having a good night's sleep in the casino, Mr. Tim here was figuring this stuff out, not on my regular laptop, on the mini laptop that I brought with me. So, and luckily I keep stuff in the cloud, so I'm able to grab stuff and make that
Right.
happen.
Right.
But every night I was doing that, and they told me, and that was a Friday, they said by Monday we need to have it. So while everyone was having a fun time at the conference, and I was too,
Right. Right.
I was doing that all night long. So that's, I still have the bags under my eyes because of that.
You're still waiting for that 8 hours of makeup sleep
I'm
from it.
still absolutely. It enhances my handsomeness. I'm not as handsome as you, sir, but I'm working up.
It adds a little ruggedness, a little you've lived and been there. It
It.
goes well with the otherwise youthful good looks, you know.
I take my beauty lessons from you. Absolutely. But just think, okay, so Tim has already had a career in the federal
Right.
government, and I'm just going to another agency. And that took from January all the way until December 9th is when I started that job. December 9th of 2019. And of course, 3 months later, we have the pandemic and we shut down.
Hmm.
But it took a person with I already had a background, I already had my secret clearance, I already had stuff, already set up. It took me about a year to get to that point to start my first day on the job.
Wow.
And then it took another, until 2021 until we're starting really producing podcasts.
Right. Right.
So it is not.
So that doesn't happen on day one either, just because there's a need for it. So let's talk about the process a little bit. Okay, so you submit a resume, you fill
Mhm.
out your profile at the website,
Yep.
USA
USAjobs.gov.
usajobs.gov,
Mhm.
usajobs.gov, easy for me to say. Okay, so you fill out your profile, you upload your resume,
Mhm.
and you pass that first level. Somebody checks
Mhm.
the resume, and you meet enough of the qualifications that you go on to
Mhm.
another round. Is
Yep.
that where you get an interview, or you get sent for a test, or what happens at that after that stage?
At that point, unless you're a disabled veteran
Hmm.
or somebody with a disability, because remember, they get extra points added to their resume. So you pray to whatever deity that you believe in that none of those people have applied to get in front of you, and you get that interview. And now, if you are a person with a disability, then you want to make sure that you're including that into your application and all that. Veterans, people with disabilities, and disabilities can be a simple thing like tinnitus.
Hmm.
It's a documented disability, so make sure you're doing that. If you're a veteran with no disabilities, you get points. If you're a veteran with disabilities, and I'm a veteran, I'm rated at 90%. Um, I get a lot of points. I'm the first in the line every time.
So
So
disability doesn't mean you're out on disability, like you're unable to work because of it. It means you have a condition that may need accommodation or
sure,
right.
absolutely, absolutely. So let's say none of that applies to you. You got in. Tim didn't apply before you, so just
Right.
praise the gods that I didn't apply before you, and you get that interview. Now they're going to ask you, questions about, just the questions that they ask you are situation, action, result questions. So they're going to
Mhm.
give you a situation, and they're going to ask you, have you dealt with um, really lazy people in your work environment, and how did you resolve the situation? And you're going to go situate what the situation was, the action that you took, and the result that you took. And then they're obviously going to ask you what your strengths, what your weaknesses. And the strengths are easy. That's, we all have strengths that we know of that we can pull out of our hat.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
Mine is tenacity, and people really like that one. But my weakness is I have a hard time working in a team because I want everyone to be at my level, and I have a hard time turning in work that is not at a level I feel is worthy of my signature. But I am working on it, and here's how I'm working on it.
Hmm.
So, yes, it is a weakness, but I'm working on it, and here's how I'm getting better with it. Slam dunk. People,
It's a great answer. I remember the days like when I was coming out of college or in my 20s or whatever, where the advice was always, well, give them a strength disguised. Like, I care too much. I love too much. I work so hard that sometimes I forget to take my vacation or a weekend or whatever. Like, now everybody knows that's a BS answer. It has to be actually a weakness that you're in touch with. But the other part, as you said, that's so important to highlight, if you're working on it, that's what they want to see, that you're able to identify something that could be a problem in the workforce. But here are the steps that I'm taking so that it won't be a problem for you when you hire me. Or it'll be much less of a problem than it would be for most people or what have you.
well,
And
when I got,
also that you're honest, because
yeah,
again, the I love too much, I care too much, I work too hard.
mm,
I can't, I can't do anything but 110% from the minute I wake up to the minute I go to sleep. Like, nobody believes that, right? So you're losing the. Maybe people believe that in 1994, but in any
20,
experienced HR person in this century knows that that was something that somebody read in a self-help book and decided to throw in, and it's not true, and they're not being genuine with it.
exactly, exactly. Well, and a lot of HR people are trained to see that now.
Right.
Yeah, maybe they weren't trained in 94 or 84, but they're trained to see that now, and they're going to go, So even what I say has changed over the years, because I do have weaknesses,
Right.
and the big thing is working on those weaknesses. With my first federal job, I worked for the Veterans Administration, and I had gone into default with my student loans because a degree in theater is a degree that gets you into McDonald's.
Right. Right.
Would you like fries with that? And so I defaulted on my student loans, but I had a plan to pay it back. And I had contacted my creditor,
Hmm.
and we were doing a payment plan. And the person did my background check. They saw that, and they were like, thank you for being honest about that, because I don't even have to ask you about it. I contacted your creditor already. I wanted to see what you were going to say. And if you didn't say any of that, you were not getting this job.
Right.
And that was fantastic. It also didn't hurt that the guy that interviewed me was a prior service Air Force colonel,
Hmm.
and when he said, I'd like to offer you the job. Well, before he said that, he was like, "Can I have you step outside? I want to talk to my team here." And I stepped outside for 5 minutes. And he comes in, and he's like, "I'd like to offer you the job." And I said, "I'd like you guys to step outside for 5 minutes. I need to think about it." And he's like, "You're serious?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah. Step outside. I need to think about this for 5 minutes." He's starting to stand up. I'm like, "Sir, I am kidding with you. I'm enlisted. Worked on C-130s. I had to screw with you. I'm sorry. I had to screw with you." Loved working with the guy. Fantastic. He was
Right.
like 5 levels above me, but he and I had a great rapport with
He
that.
probably
So
never forgot you after that.
never forgot me after that. No, absolutely not.
It was a little bit of a risk, but because when you get that offer, then it's like you shut up, don't do anything wrong. Okay, so that's you went over a little bit of the interviewing. What else is in the process that people should be aware of before they apply or as they're going
Sure.
along?
They're going to do a background check. They're going
Hmm.
to check you out, depending on what your clearance level is going to be. There's multiple levels: top secret, secret. There's one called public trust or NACI, not to get more acronyms at you, but we'll just call it public trust.
Right.
Uh, so they're going to check your finances. They're going to check your friends. They're going to see if somebody can exploit you. If
Hmm.
somebody can, and there are people that get in. At CBP, we have a thing called the wall of shame. And that's where agents, or, not even agents, other people were bribed. Maybe they were having some financial issues. Maybe they got caught doing something that they shouldn't have done, or they got set up in a
Right.
situation that they shouldn't have got set up with. And now they're being exploited that way. So they're going to check to see if you can be exploited in any way, shape, or form. The big thing is, like during that convention, get the paperwork in. If they're doing a background check and they say get it in on Monday and it's Friday, and you're going to Super Joe Pardo's Indie PodCon, get it in. It's
Right.
more important that you get love Super Joe.
Hmm.
It's important you get the paperwork in, because we are not going to wait for you, because guess what? There's 5 other people.
Don't miss a deadline.
Yeah, don't miss it. And if you have to miss the deadline, make sure you have the person's phone number and call them as soon as you can and go, listen, whatever is going to make you miss that deadline, let them know. Ask them if you can have an extension. They're human beings, they understand, but they're also under a time crunch. So
Right.
when I when people ask me, hey Tim, how long does it take to make a podcast for the federal government, I always do the for every 1 minute of recording, it takes me 8 minutes of editing. In reality, it takes me 4 minutes of editing for 1 minute of recording. So, I give them that cushion, and the people that are going to bring you in, they need a cushion too. And they
Right.
understand things happen, but they're going to say, turn it in on Monday. They probably don't need it until the next Friday.
Right.
But if they can get it done and get a day off from work, yeah, why not? Go for it. It's one
Right.
less thing for them to do. So do them a favor.
Now, are you applying for when you apply through the system or you submit your resume? Are you applying for a specific job at a specific location with a specific manager, or are you applying for a specific class of job, whether it's one specific title or it's a bunch of jobs that fit a category? Like, how does that work? And in particular, if you don't get the job that you interview for, is there a chance that your resume will get picked up by somebody hiring for that same position in a different department, a different location, maybe at the desk next door to the one where you didn't get the job or something like that? Like, what's the relationship between your application and where you might end up?
Well, there's 435 agencies in the federal on the executive side in
Mm-hmm.
the federal government. So when you're applying, you're going to be applying for a specific job in a specific location. Usually, there are
Mm-hmm.
some jobs out there that they're doing it for multiple locations, and you'll choose which location is your preferred one.
Right.
But let's say you get that job and it's not your preferred one. Let's say, you want to work in Palm Beach
Right.
and you get put out in Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to you. Do you want to take the job or not? Do you want to move out to Wyoming or not? I'm sure Wyoming is fantastic, but I would not want to move out to Wyoming. Palm Beach, I might want to move out to, but that's what you're applying for in those circumstances. Mostly you're applying for, where you're going to be working at. and the agency and the department, and that's all listed out for you in the job posting. Now, can somebody take that resume and go, "Hey, Joe, I got this guy here that has got a really good resume. I want you to take a look at it." Not officially, they can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's illegal for us to do that because that's giving you an unfair advantage. It's not public knowledge that it's passing on, so people won't do that. Do people talk? Absolutely, they talk. So that would be kind of a backhanded way to get into it. Does it work? About one time out of a million. So
it doesn't work very often, huh?
Yeah, no,
It's not like that person says, you're not going to get this job, but maybe you want to submit an application for this one. But you could do that anyway, and you're still going to the back of the line, right? I mean,
exactly. Yeah. And if the hiring manager says, "Hey, this isn't going to work out for us, but we are hiring over here. Go apply over there for that job if you haven't done it already." That's fair to do as long as that job is posted publicly.
Right.
If it's posted publicly, great. If it's not, that's a no-no, and they're not going to do that, because then once you get in the federal government, the pay is not fantastic, but it's pretty good. The benefits are pretty good, and it's pretty consistent. Even in these days of having furloughs every couple of months or years,
right?
I can still count on having a paycheck every other Monday deposited into my account, so it makes me happy.
Yeah. How has the government changed its approach to remote working now that the pandemic is no longer considered an emergency and so forth? Are they more open to employees remote working? Are more jobs listed as remote? Or most people coming on going to have to work at a physical location, and then down the line maybe remote is negotiated with a supervisor or something like that?
It's a lot better than what it used to be. The pandemic taught us a lot of great lessons. So in the pandemic, most everybody was working remote. And now a lot of the buildings have opened up. I work in the National Capital Region near DC. So there's a lot of people going back to work up there because they like to see people's faces.
Right.
When you're applying, it will say on there if it's on site, means you got to go in.
Right.
Hybrid, which you can work from home for a couple of days out of the week and then come into the thing, or fully remote. It'll say right on there. I would say go for the hybrid. If telework and that work-life balance is important to you, go for a hybrid where you go in a couple of times. Maybe our pay periods are 2 weeks. So you'd go in, a couple of times within that 2-week pay period, and you would be fine. You can negotiate that to where you can be teleworking 4 days out of the week and then go in 1 day out of the week. It really depends on what the agency needs, what that office needs you in there for.
What do you see the advantages of being hybrid versus being completely remote?
Well, hybrid, it helps because I know here in CBP, I said earlier, we're top heavy. So working in a headquarters type facility here in DC, it's good that people see your face. Our leadership is older. They're not young spring chickens like we are, Ross. They really are. They're not as handsome as we are. I can tell you that for sure. They need a lot of work. That's why they should do podcasting, because they have faces for podcasting. Not live streaming. But and that's a generational thing. They're the boomers are not used to this kind of stuff.
Right.
And it's difficult to manage people when they're teleworking, and they don't know how to do that. And it's trying to teach an old dog a new trick.
Right.
I think when that generation finally moves out and is retired, then you're going to see us Gen Xers kind of, and not all of us Gen Xers are about remote work either.
Right.
But more of us are the next generations below us, you're definitely going to see more work-life balance,
Right.
and things like that. So that's, so the future looks really bright for that kind of stuff. Right now, today, as we sit here in 2023, we're 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 allowing it to happen more than we did beforehand, but people still are not. I think hybrid is the best because you get your face in there, and when you get your face in there, then you can talk that boomer language
Right.
versus Gen X language versus Gen Y language or millennials and
Right.
stuff.
Right.
So
Because really everything's tracked, everything's online. Like, it doesn't really matter that much anymore in terms of productivity, whether someone's at home or they're at the office. In fact, there are fewer distractions when they're at home. But I do think it's good for people to see people in action too. Like, I would
sure,
probably choose hybrid if in the ideal circumstance. I also enjoy being around people that I work with most of not necessarily 5 to 7 days a week, but at least once or twice a week, to come in and break out of that isolation and, you know, kind of get
mhm,
a sense of what people are really about and doing, and, just exchange ideas in a way that's a little different than doing it on a Zoom meeting or something like that.
exactly. Well, and the beauty of the telework is that, like in my immediate team, we have somebody in Buffalo, New York. We have another
Hmm.
person in Minnesota, and then myself and my boss. We're here in the National Capital Region. We have a person that she's leaving us. She lives in Maryland. So we can get the best and brightest from around the country without having to disrupt their home life. They don't have to move to DC because DC is expensive. Virginia
Right,
is
right.
expensive. Jersey is, it's
Expensive.
expensive. Uh, and they don't let me pump my own gas in Jersey.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a talk with you guys about that.
It's we see it as a privilege, not a,
Oh, okay.
a demerit. It's nice when it's really, really freezing cold out that you don't have to get out of your car.
I agree. But I feel bad for those guys. Yeah, this is a
Yeah.
whole other live
Hey,
stream
it's a job. It's a job. I mean, that's part of the idea, right? I mean, it's a job that we don't want to
exactly.
take away from people.
Yeah.
Um, do you have a couple more minutes before we wrap up? You want to
Free.
check out a new StreamYard feature that's
I
here?
would love to. Yeah.
It's video backgrounds, and I'm just gonna try one and see what it looks like.
Ooh. It matches my.
Um, so now, is it moving?
Well, a little bit. And it could be me, because I was exposed to a lot of chemicals in the Air Force. So,
No, it is moving. It is moving,
okay, good. Oof, then it's not me.
but
Oof.
but it's very subtle.
It
So
is
this
very.
one's called Blue Ocean. Let's see what else we. Okay, so that's back. Oh, that's back to just plain black, I guess.
Mhm,
Oh, okay. So you can turn it on, you can turn it off, and go back to just the plain black, or go back to what I had before,
mhm.
and then back to Blue Ocean. All right, let me try another one. Video backgrounds. This one's a yellowish color. Ooh, that's harsh.
Yeah.
Put your shades on.
Hold on. Look, where's my
You can
glass?
see now. This I can more easily see the line down at the bottom moving.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
a subtle motion.
Mhm,
Um, let me see what else. So that one's called Golden Sunset. Just in case you want to keep track at home.
mhm.
Let's see. Okay, so this one's called Bubbles Dark. I don't see the bubbles. Do you?
I see, like, like diamonds kind of rounded off in the back there. Yeah.
All
I
right.
like it because it's, really dark and matches my shirt nicely. Yeah.
I'm gonna check my.
It's very slimming. Not that we need it. Not that we need it at all. It's for other, live streamers that need to, have a little extra there. So,
I did have a video background that I made myself, but I don't think I have it handy. It would be fun to try that out. Um, Let me see real quick if I have that. Probably not. Um, studio. Oh, I would need a green screen for that one. Never mind.
Yeah.
So let's try one more. It's Halloween's coming.
That's very Halloween. That is awesome.
This one's called Orange Waves. So we've seen Blue Ocean, Gold. Just a review for those of you keeping score at home, ladies and gentlemen. We have Blue Ocean, Golden Sunset. Blue Ocean is very subtle.
Very subtle.
Very subtle. It's almost subliminal. Golden Sunset has a little more motion. Bubbles Dark. I guess maybe it's my eyesight, but I just don't see the bubbles. And then Orange Wave is perfect for Halloween. It's almost like a little spooky the way both sides are waving at the same time.
It kind of reminds me of like some things I saw in the 70s. You know, it's a 70s painting for me.
Riding that wave, man.
Yep.
Let's see. This one is called Tilting Tiles.
Okay. Yeah, I see them moving.
They're moving.
Yeah.
We have movement. Let's see. This is dark particles. Now these are moving.
Yeah.
This one I didn't see the bubbles, but the dark particles. Yes.
That's really cool.
So that is moving, and I think there's like maybe one or two more that I didn't try. Let's try this one. This is Pink Waves. Yeah.
If I had long flowing hair, this would be
that would be your look then.
That would look. I would use this if I had hair.
And then we have Orange Ocean.
I'm allergic to oranges, so I probably wouldn't use that one.
That's Orange Wave. And this one is Golden Sunset. And that one is Blue Ocean. Anyway, it's fun checking that out. So you're probably one of the first to play around with it. It's a new feature. You can upload your own background, which will be cool. I do have or can find some motion backgrounds online and try some different things. Very cool. One of the things I think they probably built into it now, but one of the issues people had the first go around when tried is that loop where it comes to the end of the video and then there's this hitch before it starts replaying again. So clearly in those that they've provided, that issue is solved. It'll be interesting to see. I'm sure they've come up with a way to do it when I upload my own 10-second or what have you video.
Sure, absolutely.
But anyway,
with StreamYard, they have great, because I see them on Facebook all the time, and when I see a question in their Facebook groups, I see people get answers from bigwigs at StreamYard all the time, and so I need to get back into StreamYard myself. I've been away. I apologize. Godfather. I will make my sins go away.
It's always fun using StreamYard. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to the team. But I'm here as well, and we can troubleshoot together as we've done in the past with other things. So, Tim, thank you so much. It was a great discussion. I'm really psyched about what you're doing with podcasting, both for the government and on your own. And keep up the great work. CreateArtPodcast.com is the website. Is there anywhere else you want people to connect with you?
That's the best website to get me. That's my flagship, as I like to call it, my flagship website. You can email me at Timothy@CreateArtPodcast.com. I'm really easy to find socially. My mug, because I'm so handsome, not as handsome as Ross, my mug is out there in a lot of different places. Some places I don't want it out there at, but no, I'm kidding. I am out there. That's the best way to get a hold of me, and I'm more than happy to answer questions or help you out. not only with creativity, but if you're interested in podcasting or the like. I also run a podcast meetup here locally in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So my big thing is give, give, give. Eventually, something will come back my way, and it already has. Just by having a friendship with you, Ross, all the things that I've given out, and it's come back full circle to me. Just these connections that we have.
Yeah.
That's all I need to keep moving and keep motivated and keep going.
Well, it's so great having you on. Tim Brien, check him out, createartpodcast.com. Thanks for joining us on Brand on Broadcasting, Tim.
Thank you.
All right, that is Tim Brien. Again, check him out, Create Art Podcast. This is Brand on Broadcasting. You can find all of our shows and links to the episodes and everything else you need at livestreamuniverse.com/shows, livestreamuniverse.com/shows. Have a great day, everybody. It's having trouble ending this.